Next is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the Housing Authority may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The matter may be referred to staff through the Executive Director for investigation and report.
One card, Herbert Milano.
Good afternoon, members of the Housing Authority, city staff. My name is Herbert Milano. I would like to address you with regard to the document that the city has prepared in the Finance Department, the performance measures and accomplishments. I spoke earlier today with regard to this particular document, and I did not give sufficient credit, I think, to our city manager and to the staff for going through the process of developing this document. And I forget that the things that I tend to do on a very frequent basis, sometimes for other organizations it's more of a culture change, and it's a difficult process as it is to get so many divisions aligned to a new way of thinking and reporting. There are many aspects of the community development and housing section of this report that I think begins to address the type of things that I'm looking for. For example, the number of people who use job search services, during the 2005-2006 year. There are close to 12,000 people serviced by it. So if we were to take a number like that and compare it year to year, we get a sense of how we are assisting the public with regard to jobs and employment. And it would be the same thing with regard to the number of people that we assist in housing. So the total number of people who we assisted with Section 8, for example. So when you begin to look at the numbers of how we are assisting them, we begin to get a better picture of how we're doing as a city. One of the documents, I should say a published book, that has been influential to me is called The Social State of the Nation. It was a book published by a university. I can't remember the name of the university. And their intent was to create an annual report, but I think the task was so humongous that they didn't quite have the funding to go through with it. But we did something similar in the city of Glendale about 5 years ago, which was a Healthy Cities report, where we tried to quantify how we're doing as a city with regard to housing and crime and education and youth at risk and so forth. And it was, I think, a magnificent effort to get that document out. And it is my hope that the city will fund on a continual basis, year to year, a way to get those social statistics so that you can make wise decisions with regard to your budget year to year, so that you can address the need, be it a social need, a housing need, youth needs, so that we can begin to aim for certain types of objectives and corrections to the problems that we have. We get so immersed with the dollar signs that we really forget what it is that we intended, and if we made sufficient strides towards it. And if we do that, then on a periodic basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis, we could get a report back to see, are we moving in the right direction? Are we meeting our goals? What do we need to change? What policies need to change? What new policies can we bring? And then you allow the city departments to be creative. You allow them to come to you and say, we tried this policy and it's not working. We'd like to try something else. So you create an environment of candor. You allow people to take risks. You allow them to come to you with frankness and say, this thing is really not working for us. Let's try something else. And they come to you with those numbers. And I think by creating that kind of culture, we can create a better budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have no more cards. All communications closed. What is next, please?
At 6A on the business agenda is the Director of Community Development and Housing regarding approval of housing programs and proposed budget for fiscal year 2007-2008. At 6A1 is motion approving the housing program proposed budget. At 6A2 is resolution appropriating $50,000 to provide funds for the Section 8 HQS repair grants program.
Go to Mr. Starbird or go to Ms. Blake.
Madeline Blake, Director for the report.
Who will tell us that we've seen all this before.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Housing Authority. You have before you today the program budget for the Housing Authority. for just over $42 million. I will note that well over 60% of that funding comes from and goes to the Section 8 program. But the budget does try to balance services and housing services and the development of housing for renters as well as homeowners. It's no secret housing affordability continues to be an issue in the city of Glendale with a rental vacancy rate below 2% and single-family homes at about 700,000, condos over 400,000. So I think we found in the community surveys that housing affordability was one of the areas of most interest for the majority of people in the city. Currently, we have 10 projects in some phase of development. Since 2001, 135 units have been developed, and we have approximately 160 units currently under development or some phase of development. So at this point, we do have a very brief PowerPoint that Peter Zovac will present that just very briefly goes through the budget, the sources of funds, and how those funds intend to be used. Mr. Zovac?
Mr. Yusefian?
Mr. Chair, you'll be happy to know that I will not have any questions on this budget. It has been prepared very nicely. It's very self-explanatory. The only thing that I would ask the staff to comment on, which we did get a report in our weekly report, dealing with the poverty level in Glendale
Increasing.
dropping by 47%. So maybe you can discuss that issue.
I can, Mr. Yusefian, members of the Housing Authority, that actually was prepared by Don Nakamoto of the Workforce Investment Board. The Workforce Investment Board is looking at those statistics because they affect the types of employment and training programs that the board is interested in. And so Don does both labor market and demographic analysis, and he did this most recent analysis, and I'm sorry I didn't bring it with me, but basically it does indicate that the poverty rate has dropped almost in half since 2000, and I think some of that is related to the housing market. But we see changes in the demographics in general. We see the school district, their enrollment being reduced. So at some point, maybe when we have a lighter meeting, I would like to ask Don to come and make a presentation to this body, maybe joint with the redevelopment agency. He also has done some really interesting studies on the local labor market and the employment base, which I think the agency will find of interest.
Mr. Cotero?
I was going to say, some of it may also be due to the change in welfare status, isn't that correct? As people move off the program as they're required to work, they may be technically dropping out of the low-income status, although, in fact, may continue to be.
Yeah, that's correct.
Any other questions? Did the colleagues still want the PowerPoint? It's up to you.
I don't want to disappoint Mr. Zovac. I'm sure he spent hours
He's looking
preparing
very
this.
shocked.
Would you be disappointed if we didn't call you up, Peter?
No, I would not. Mr. Mayor, the staff is never disappointed when you don't call them up.
But they are prepared.
Well, if you don't want them up there, is there a motion? CS7?
At this point, I would like to move 6A1 and 2.
Second.
No further discussion, roll call.
Authority members Raymond,
Yes.
Mincy,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Brazilian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Chairman Weaver.
Aye, it's unanimous.
But I do have a question slightly off this for Madeline. Madeline, and I see that the budget has $32 million in renter assistance for Section 8. What, if any, realistic way is there for city, and I mentioned this before, for city leaders to get an increased amount of funds in that category on a city basis? Is it completely filtered through the state and through the region? Or is there any effort we can make when we go to Washington to speak to Congressman Schiff for him to either earmark or obtain an allocation for additional funds on that Section 8 program?
Mr. Chair, members of the Housing Authority, the city does get the funding directly, but it really is a national issue related to funding for vouchers. So when they make funding available for additional vouchers is when we have an opportunity, and generally we compete very effectively because we are fully leased. Some areas are not fully leased, but they have not made new vouchers available for quite some time, and it's not likely that we would be able to get an allocation of new vouchers unless the federal government made money available. The program uses so much funding to keep the existing vouchers in place that they just haven't made any new vouchers available.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We've had the roll call. What is next, please?
Are there any authority member or staff comments?
Seeing none,
Move to adjourn.
second around.
Second.
And we're stand adjourned, 2:59 p.m. Goodbye.
I have my weekly report back. Thank you. I thought it was a good idea.
Oh, that's a different.